Hello and welcome to Silence, a podcast that gives women a chance to get honest and open about what it's really like surviving and thriving in what often feels like a male-dominated world. All of my guests have been handpicked from the fields of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM, where inclusivity and diversity can be a real issue. I know this only too well, having been a mechanical engineer myself for a number of years. I'm Dr. Shanice O'Mara, now a television broadcaster. I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation over the years, and through my TV work, I've met some incredibly inspiring women from a diverse range of STEM fields. These women are true trailblazers, and I've often felt so empowered myself by learning what they're like as real people, usually when the cameras have been turned off. Each week on Silence, one of these women shares her unique experiences and truth, without the usual pressure of having to promote her accomplishments or uphold an image or facade. How? Because all of my guests are deliberately kept anonymous and disguised to ensure that we as listeners are not distracted or even intimidated by the usual kinds of societal labels. The women of STEM on this show have amazingly impressive CVs, but most importantly, they're human, just like the rest of us, and I want to share the inspiration and wisdom that I've enjoyed from them with you. It's my hope that you really relate to what we chat about today. If so, please do subscribe to Silence and maybe even leave some comments and reviews. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guest is in the field of chemical biology. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
I must say, I have never met someone who is doing both chemistry and biology at the same time in a degree. That's very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very new to me too.
How's it going?
Yes, it's good. It's very different. I originally have a background in chemistry. That's what I did my undergraduate first degree in. But chemical biology is all about using chemistry and applying it to biology problems. And then instead of outsourcing the biological testing to a biologist, I get trained in that aspect of it as well. So then I do it myself. So it gives me full ownership over creation of something and then testing it in the biological context, which is really exciting.
Gosh, so are you currently doing a postgrad then?
Yes, I'm working towards a PhD.
Wow, cool. So in the beginning, when you're a kid, did you know that you would end up doing what you're doing?
No, I had no idea. For a long time, I thought I was going to be a doctor because the school I went to, it wasn't an amazing school. And if you were good at science, especially if you're a woman, they'd kind of tell you, oh, you're good at science, therefore you're going to be a nurse. And then eventually, a few years later, they'd say, oh, okay, maybe you're so good, you could be a doctor. But that's kind of what I thought science could get you to. I didn't realize until I was about 17, really, that I could be a scientist. And I did all my medical school entry exams. I passed them all. I did lots of work experience. And it was actually by volunteering in hospitals that I thought, this isn't for me. The emotional component of dealing with patients is too much. So I thought, okay, I want to find a way where I can help people in medicine by doing research myself without having the aspect of dealing with people. I mean, I love dealing with people. My issue with it was when things would go wrong, I would just feel too emotional about it and it would then impact my work. And I thought I wouldn't be a good doctor because I would kind of take my work home with me. I would obsess over my failures and then I just wouldn't treat my patients. I wouldn't give them the care that they deserve because I wouldn't be performing to my fullest abilities because I'd be affected emotionally.
And how did you feel about making a decision like that? Like, did you feel like you were turning your back on something, or was it the actual opposite? You thought you were being of more use?
It was quite conflicting. I ended up taking a year out before going to university because I thought I really don't want to rush into this. I want to really make sure that I make the right decision. And taking a year out was kind of a big decision for me as well because I thought, oh, does that mean I'm setting my career back by a year? But actually, I was a year ahead in school anyway. So I managed to sort of justify it to myself that way, which is ridiculous because, you know, one should never have to justify to yourself, oh, I'm taking a bit of a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just felt kind of all this pressure. I think a lot of it was me giving pressure to myself and also my teachers and everyone had always kind of thought, oh, you're the best at science. They had all these high expectations. I'd gotten so used to, thanks to the age of 11, everyone saying, oh, you're going to be an amazing doctor one day, that I just kind of had to think, okay, I need to take some time out away from school and make sure I make this decision for myself because of what I want to do, not the pressures I'm feeling.
And how was that year out for you?
It was great. I did some traveling. I did lots of different part-time jobs. I did some volunteering. That's what started me getting into outreach as well, because I realized from my experiences of being a young female school student in STEM subjects, I thought actually I'd like to raise awareness of different career paths you can do that aren't medicine. So I started doing lots of volunteering in schools, giving talks. I also thought because I was so young at the time, I was a lot more relatable to
Mm.
young schoolgirls than a teacher who kind of shows up in a suit every day and they think, oh, they're my parents' age and they can't really
Mm.
relate to as well.
Yeah, it is really difficult to relate to other women. I think that's why I chose to have an anonymous podcast, because I think it's so crucial to have female role models. But I also think that there's a little bit of a difficulty in relating to them. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, yeah, I think, I mean, it's, it's a really difficult question. I'm trying to think back over all the female role models I've had, and I'm really glad that I've had them. I think it's extremely important as a woman in STEM to have female role models, but sometimes they can be really hard to find, to be honest, especially within academia. Now that when I was an undergraduate, there were plenty of female PhD students, that was fine. But now that I'm a PhD student, I'm sort of looking at, postdocs or lecturers. There aren't many women. For example, last term, as part of my PhD, I had quite a few lectures and I had to sit some exams. It's not just a straight PhD, it's 4 years. You kind of do some extra training because it's chemical biology. You can't really do an undergraduate degree in it. You get some extra training. And I had, I think, 60 lecturers last term, and not a single one was a woman.
That's interesting, because I would have thought that, subscribing to stereotypes, women tend to go into biology.
Yeah, that is true. I think because this particular course I'm doing was physical scientists, so it was chemists and engineers giving us lectures on how they'd apply things to biology. Which actually, yes, in hindsight, it would have been beneficial to have some biologists come in as well.
So, apart from the fact that they're not physically there, what do you think the difficulties are for young girls in relating to the female role models that do exist?
I think in lots of situations, the female role models, well, the people that do make it that far, the women that make it that far, have had to really, really excel in their fields. They've had to work at least twice as harder as the men. So I think lots of young female students that haven't really, found their self-confidence fully yet might see those women and think, they are absolutely incredible women. I would never be that good. I'd never be able to, have those achievements.
Right. So it's like an intimidation.
Yes, exactly.
Have you experienced that yourself?
I have, yes. When I did my undergraduate degree, um, there was one female professor at the university that kind of took on a sort of informal mentor role for me. And I then found out that she was the only female professor in the entire history of the department, which was about, over 100 years old. So, yes, she was quite intimidating. When I found out that did sort of change my interactions with her, because I thought not only is she a professor, which is already an incredible achievement, she is the first female professor and she's choosing to dedicate time to me. And I just thought, am I the most kind of appropriate person for her to mentor? Am I qualified enough? Do I have enough potential? Am I good enough?
It's interesting, though, because all those questions that you were asking yourself were all to do with your levels of self-confidence and self-esteem.
Yes. Yes, I guess they were.
Yeah, which is, I find that fascinating, because it's kind of like, well, maybe if we encouraged girls to sort of develop their self-confidence and self-esteem, then role models would actually have a more effective impact.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that is the main sort of thing holding women back in their that prevents people from women to relate from relating to role models. I think it is, them looking at kind of comparing themselves to the role model and thinking, oh, I'm not there yet. I don't think I can relate to them because I'm not as good as them. And I think as you progress throughout your career, you kind of gain more self-confidence. Also, you kind of, the achievement gap is smaller between you and your role models. So you can relate more to them. But I think there's a big problem in that fewer and fewer women are moving through the academic ladder. I think lots of women will drop out at earlier stages because of confidence issues and, a variety of other factors such as maternity leave policies and, unsociable working hours. There's lots of different factors. But I do think if self-confidence was more promoted and, a way to do that would be to have more role models and I just basically think that we really do need more women in STEM, especially in senior management roles, because if you have more, then people wouldn't be as intimidated by them because they wouldn't think, oh, there's this one professor in the entire department, her time is extremely valuable. If there were 10, then you'd know that you're not the only person being mentored.
It also takes the pressure off the mentor.
Yes, exactly. That was the other thing I felt. Every time I'd sort of meet with her, I would think, I know how busy she is. She also led the department's equality and diversity committee and everything. She did a lot of work and she led a very successful group. So I think, she really could have done with some other female colleagues, as senior as her, helping her out.
So apart from women dropping out and for various reasons, be it sort of like maternity and all the rest of it, why else do you think women don't exist in these fields as frequently as men do?
I think there is quite a lot of sexism within academia. And up until quite recently, I hadn't really experienced it. I think as an undergraduate, when I started, it was about a 50-50 gender split in chemistry. Chemistry is one of the sort of better courses within STEM when it comes to gender differences. But then when I reached my master's year, I had some sort of issues with some male members of staff that then resulted in me having to file a formal complaint against said member of staff because I wasn't being treated fairly.
In what way?
Well, so this member of staff he was a lecturer and he sort of took special interest in me. And I didn't really realize at the time. And he started by saying, oh, you're doing all of these outreach activities and activities to try and promote diversity. I'd love to get involved. And I'm always very excited when men seem keen to get involved because I think it's so important for everyone to be part of these conversations involving diversity.
I totally agree.
Yes. So I thought, great. But then, so we sort of had a working relationship of about a year where he'd help with mentoring activities and outreach activities. And as an undergraduate, I really needed a member of staff to just do simple tasks like booking rooms and, signing off forms. So he did that for me. But then he kind of he started putting me down, and I realized that his career wasn't progressing at the rate he wanted it to. And I think he didn't like that mine was. So I got an offer from a very good institution to do a PhD, which is where I'm at now. And I know that he had tried to get a job there and had gotten rejected. So he then started telling me things like, oh, I could have gone there. And, oh, the department you're joining isn't even all that good. And do you think you got in just because you're a woman and they wanted to fill a diversity quota?
Oh.
Yes. And so at one point I just said, would you be saying these things if I were a man? And he said, no. And then I thought, right, this is the time to take action. So I went to some women in the department, some of his colleagues and people a bit higher up. And I just had an informal conversation with them. And then, the timing was terrible as well. This was also the day before my graduation. But I thought I have to do this because it's not even it won't even affect just me. If this member of staff treats me like this, then he'll probably continue doing the same to other female students. And luckily the department was extremely supportive. I'd been a great student and I'd never had any issues before, so they trusted me. And I mean, they should have anyway, but I'm very glad they did. And he now doesn't work there anymore, which I'm quite glad about. But yeah, going through that, kind of really made me realize, because I thought, I guess that I didn't really realize the extent that he was being sexist until a few months in. So it also made me really wait, have I come across any other situations where there's been kind of minor sexism instances that I haven't picked up on? And I also thought it can happen to anyone. I think it definitely happened because I was transitioning from a kind of master's level to a PhD. And I think he realized that I had more potential than he'd had at my age. And I think he felt insecure by that. And he thought that he could kind of prey on my gender and try and put me down with it, which didn't work. But I'm very glad that it didn't work on me and that I knew how to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I ultimately want to ask you the question how you knew to speak up. But before we get there, I think it's so difficult to even know at the time that we are being subjected to treatment that is just not okay.
Yes, it really is.
Before you actually spoke out, what were the indicators to you that your treatment was uncomfortable?
It was kind of a series of events that escalated that were quite close together, and they were all right before I was about to leave, which, looking back on it, I do realize it was him essentially acting out because I was leaving, and I think wanting to make me feel worse than I was because I was leaving to go somewhere better than he'd managed. So there was an awards ceremony where I ended up winning the most promising alumni of the year across engineering and science, which I was not expecting at all, and I was blown away by. And he wasn't really invited, but he managed to show up anyway. And so that whole evening, while I was winning the award, he was just kind of just drinking, just kind of being really negative, just drawing attention to himself. So that was one thing, which again, at the time I sort of brushed off. But then because there was a series of events after that, then so I had this housemate who was female as well. And he sort of started flirting with her, which was extremely inappropriate. And then he started sending me messages saying, how would you feel if I were to date her? And I would say, firstly, I want nothing to do with this. I'm leaving. I want you out of my life. Our professional relationship ended. I don't see any need why we should continue it in any other way. And I would also say, and, it's also, you can't start a relationship with her. And he'd kind of say, why? Why can't I? And I just say, basically, just leave me alone. And then she was kind of, he was good at being very charming. And in fact, when he'd lectured us, lots of the female students had kind of, developed sort of crushes on him. I never had, but it meant my friend, was kind of falling for this act. Yes, exactly. And then a few of my friends, they're all incredibly supportive. I'm so glad that I had incredibly supportive friends throughout all of this. They then said, right, we're going to make a complaint against him. If you don't feel ready, that's fine, but we want to do one anyway based on what we've observed. And he found out about this. I think it was my friend that he'd sort of entrapped a bit. I think she found out and she told him. And then he started trying to threaten me, and he started saying things such as, if people complain, they'll be the ones that will suffer. I was hired by this senior person. He's going to protect me. And if your friends complain, it will be on their academic record forever. Things that just weren't true. And when I made the complaint, I found that out. And I think the escalating moment was he ended up kind of messaging me at 2 a.m. one morning, right before my friends were going to make the complaint, just kind of trying to threaten me. And it ended up giving me a panic attack. And I never really get panic attacks. And he knew this. So that's when I thought, okay, I'm in a very supportive environment. My career's going well. I have supportive friends. I have a great boyfriend. If he's making me feel like this, how could he make other people who aren't as lucky as me feel? And that's why I immediately emailed my personal tutor, who was a woman, which I think really helped. And I said, can we meet? There's something important I want to discuss. And she took it very seriously. From the tone of the email, she said, of course. And she said, do you want a welfare officer to be there as well, who was also female, which was also very beneficial. And so then I had about a week to prepare for this meeting. And I thought, okay, I want to really present a case. So I went through old email conversations, all sorts of things to collect specific things he'd said so that I could present to them the exact way he'd said them, which was, quite emotionally difficult because at that point I realized that, it had been an ongoing problem. So looking back, I would read things and think, okay, this wasn't okay at the time, but I didn't pick up on it. But I'm so glad I did that. I also partly did it because I didn't want to just go into a meeting, file a complaint, and paraphrase things or say them in a way that, I also thought I want to be fair to him. I don't want to make the things he said seem much, much worse. And then that could have affected me. I could have got into trouble. But I also don't want to make the things he said not seem as serious as they were.
How do you reckon you did come across? Like, were people generally on your side?
They were, absolutely. My personal tutor knew me quite well. It turns out then that the welfare officer had been at that awards ceremony as well and had seen me win. And she said, when you walked up on stage, you got the biggest round of applause the entire night. And she said, I could see how respected you were by everyone at the university. So she was saying, we would believe you anyway, especially with this proof. But knowing that you were a respected member of the community and all the great work you'd done and all the achievements you'd got kind of really, it helped.
Gosh,
it did help.
You've been through a lot.
Yes. And then my personal tutor, it was a very emotional, it ended up being a 2.5-hour meeting where we all discussed this. And my personal tutor at one point teared up and said, I'm so sorry you've gone through this. And, her apologizing really meant a lot. It was absolutely not her fault. She had nothing to do with it. But I think it was kind of just woman to woman. And then they both told me that they'd experienced similar things, maybe not to that extent. But yes, I just think it's so important to have women you can go to discuss these things, especially ones that can relate to what you've been through. And I just felt so safe. And in that meeting, I knew I'd done the right thing. And they were just so thankful and also so apologetic for what I was going through. And I now have a fantastic relationship with the university. I've left now, but I'm in touch. I get invited back to talk at events. So I'm very glad that, they kind of took my side over a member of staff.
Yeah, I feel quite sort of teared up as well.
I'm sorry.
No, just do you know what? I'm quite emotional over your story because I kind of just think of my own journey.
Yeah.
And I was not blessed with the awareness that I was going through things that were unacceptable. So I'm so happy for you that you had that support and you were able to speak up.
Thank you.
How did you know to do that? Like, did you have people in your corner bringing it out of you, or have you been educated to always speak up? Like, where did that assertiveness come from?
I think the bottom line is it came from me. I think it's from a lot of the outreach I've done. I've done a lot of work with disadvantaged pupils in local schools, and I've seen them go through bullying and go through really difficult family situations. And I'm not qualified to deal with those things, but I've had quite a few instances where young pupils will kind of try and open up to me. And then what I've done is I've kind of coached them towards opening up to teachers or counselors, which they've found very, very scary, but in the end has really benefited them. And then sometimes I would then, weeks later, they would thank me and they'd say, I was really terrified to talk to this teacher who I've always been quite scared of, but I'm really glad I did because I'm now getting the help I need. So I think I just thought, I've helped so many pupils go through this. So I think I kind of owe it to them as well to do the same thing and apply what's worked to them, to me. And to add to that, I did have incredible support from my friends. Every single one of my friends was incredibly supportive. As I said, they ended up making a complaint as well. But it was kind of them. It was them having the assertiveness of not asking me to complain, them saying, at one point, one of them said, if you came along with us, it would kind of have more gravitas, it would have more of an effect coming directly from you, but we don't want to ask you that. We're going to do what we can. You can just sit back. You don't have to worry about anything. So, I thought my friends are being so selfless and going through this and involving themselves in a situation that's not particularly pleasant. And, then they will get questioned. They're dragging themselves into a place where they really don't have to. And I think lots of other people I know would never do that for someone. So I thought, yes, I'm going to do it as well. Just having all that support, having all these people already having started things just really encouraged me, because I knew that even if things went wrong, I'd have them to fall back on, and that they would say, it was really brave of you and we're really proud that you did that. And that is what they said. And it meant a lot.
Do you think you spoke out at the time you did because you were leaving?
Yes. Yeah, I wish that hadn't been a factor, but it was. It was also, the timing, the last few events were the week before. But yes, maybe if I'd had another year left, maybe it would have taken me longer to realize. Maybe I would have put up with it for longer. I don't know. My personal tutor, that's one of the first things she said. She said, "I'm really, really sorry you've been through this. I'm also sorry about the timing. If we'd known earlier, maybe we could have stopped some of these things from happening." But then she also said, "But I'm also glad about the timing, because it means you can really step away and let us deal with things and you don't have to be around." And then I specifically requested that I didn't want to know what happened. I know that they then had a meeting with him. And at one point, I got an email asking for my permission to discuss some of the things that I'd said, which was another big decision, because it meant he would know exactly, that it was me and what I said. But they respected my decision of not telling me about the outcome, because I just thought, I'm moving to a new city. I'm moving, I'm starting a new degree essentially. And I just want, I don't want this kind of negative energy in my life anymore. And they also, they specifically requested, so this was the day before graduation, as I said earlier, they, or immediately after the meeting, I walked out, and they called up someone to specifically ban him from coming to my graduation. And I hadn't requested this. And they said, "Okay, we won't tell you what we'll discuss with him because you specifically asked us not to, but we will tell him that he under no circumstances can contact you or anyone close to you again, and that if he does, you will come straight to us and there will, serious action will be taken."
Wow. I am thinking about the members of the audience that don't have that kind of support network that you
Yes,
had. You really sound, it sounds like you really had a fortress around you
I really
of
did.
support.
Yes.
And I want to kind of just acknowledge any listeners that don't have those kinds of friends, maybe because they're doing subjects where there aren't many girls around to sort of become friends with. They may be in subjects that are so heavily male dominated that it's difficult to find friends.
Yes.
And it's difficult to find maybe female mentors and seniors. Do you have any advice for anyone that maybe is in that position?
I'd say there's always going to be people going through the same thing. I know they could be difficult to find. For example, I know that the Royal Society of Chemistry is about to start an official sort of, I think they're calling it a bullying hotline or something like that. where I think if you, especially as a woman, if you experience any sort of, bullying or harassment, I think there'll be a phone number 24/7 that you can call and get advice from. So I would say even if in your immediate circle there isn't, you don't have that supportive network like I did, I think looking at institutional bodies, so sort of like the Royal Society of Chemistry or, the engineering equivalents, there will be people through there. There will be some sort of, you know, help available. There'll be some sort of either counselling service, and they can help these institutions. They accredit lots of the universities and lots of the degrees. So it's also in their best interests for members of staff at universities that they work with that they sort of behave in an appropriate manner and that they represent these institutions well.
What was your early childhood like? What kind of kid were you, and what were your caregivers like, your parents? I'm just trying to understand the origin of your self-assuredness, really.
Well, my parents were great. I think they always gave me a lot of independence. I sent myself away to boarding school when I was 10 because I really liked music. And for a while, I thought that's what I wanted to do. And there was this kind of boarding school that specialized in music. And I thought, oh, that sounds really fun. And I was really shy at the time because I was at a school where there weren't many other kind of musical or scientist students. So I think my parents were terrified that I said, hey, can I go off to boarding school? Because they thought, oh, she's very shy, will she make friends? But I don't know, it felt like the right thing to me. But they were very good at not showing me their concerns. They were always very supportive and basically said, we trust you, whatever you want to do, we'll do our best to support you with. So I went off to boarding school, and I think that really changed me, just being around people like me. I wasn't kind of considered a geek anymore because there were people there like me.
Did you choose your school?
I did, yes. There was an audition process because there was it was musical, so I also had to be good at music. But yes, before that, my parents moved around a lot. So I counted just a few days ago, and I've been to 8 different schools and academic institutions. So we moved around a lot, which I think was, the source of my shyness at a younger age. But then it just got to a point where I thought, right, this new school I'm at, I might only have a year or two. I don't know yet. So, I might as well put myself out there. And if I think I'm embarrassing myself and, not being cool by talking a lot, then that's fine. I have nothing to lose. So yes, I would say my childhood, at first I found it challenging from moving around all the time, and then my parents divorced. And, there was some tension there, but then it also made me grow up fast.
How old were you when they divorced?
12. And it was quite an ugly divorce. And then they tried to get back together. But I was the one that said, look, this isn't working. If you're trying to do it for me, this isn't going to make me any happier. Just don't. And then things got ugly between them. And I was the one who said, I don't want to go to court. I'm 12. I don't want to have to speak up about custody. So I said, I'd like to arrange my own custody agreement. I will aim to spend my time 50-50 with you, but it's up to me where I spend the night.
Amazing.
Yes. So that's what I've been doing ever since. Yeah, I just knew that they'd always trusted me to be independent. So I thought, well, at this time they should too. Why change their attitude towards parenting now? And now I have a great relationship with both of them.
And where do you get your STEM genes from?
Nowhere. No one in my family is a scientist. I don't know. I think the way my brain works has always been very mathematical. And I think that's actually why I was so good at music. Yes. But I found that, I was very, very good at maths as well. So I liked, the maths sort of science, sort of situation of you have a problem, you work it out, there is a right answer or a wrong one. I liked that. But I also liked being able to be creative with it. which I think then when I was introduced to science in school, it's also probably worth mentioning that I grew up in a different country where science isn't really introduced until later. So then as soon as it was introduced, I just thought, oh, I like this because it allows me to still be creative whilst having this problem solving attitude.
Gosh, it sounds like all the adversity you've gone through, you've turned it around to make them golden opportunities.
I mean, that's what I've tried. So, I very much appreciate you saying that.
Have you tried that consciously, or is that with hindsight that you realise that, that's what you're doing?
Yes, I think when my parents split up, I realised they'd been unhappy, and that they'd been unhappy because of a series of decisions they'd made. And then that made me realise, oh, I don't want to be like that. And I'm in charge of my own decisions. So from now on, I'm going to make sure that the decisions I make, are to have a positive outcome on my life. And that's what I've tried ever since. And that's also why I then chose to leave the country I grew up in, because I thought, well, my parents speak English, I speak English. I think there's more opportunities for me in a different country that will also give me even more independence. So yes, I worked really hard to get myself scholarships and bursaries and help. And I moved over to England for sixth form and then just stayed on.
Amazing. Do you know what? It sounds like you have discovered something that some people take a whole lifetime to discover, which is the importance of taking responsibility for your own life.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think even adults in their more senior years continue to blame other people for the way their life has gone. I've definitely been guilty of that, where
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, my parents pushed me, I'm such a victim, and and snapping out of that and just saying, you know what, my attitude is my own choice is one of the most mature and positive things you can do for yourself. And it sounds like you discovered that at the age of 12.
Oh, I guess maybe I did. Thanks. I also, I wasn't even thinking of it in that way. I thought at the time, I want to make sure that my achievements are mine. I don't want to feel like I owe anything to anyone, partly so that then people can't hold things over me and say, oh, I got this. And I just I thought I'd have a much greater sense of fulfillment if I got something because I knew I'd worked hard towards it. So, not through nepotism or, through my parents pushing me. I just thought if it's, through just me, then it will feel a lot more rewarding. And then I thought I'd be able to sort of help other people and inspire others more if I could kind of go into a school and do outreach and I could say, I did this myself and my background wasn't that different to yours. I did come from, not much money and, not many scientists around, but I managed it and so can you.
But then, so how come you never ever had a case of poor me, look what I'm having to do all by myself, no one's helping me, that kind of like resentful thing that people can fall into, that they've got it so tough. Did you ever suffer from that? And if not, how come?
Not really. I'm very hard on myself. I've had several situations where I think, oh, I haven't done as well as I could have, but I'll always think, oh, but that was because of me. I don't know why. I just always thought that I'm in charge of my own life. I think it's because of that independence that my parents gave me from a young age. Even simple things such as I would always do my homework by myself. So I think it's just from a young age, I've just thought, yes, my work is mine and no one should give me help. Especially, I think once I got to A level, because I came from a non-scientific family, I thought, my parents couldn't even help me if they wanted to. And at this point, I was in a different country to them as well. So that was another factor. So I thought, if they can't help me, then it's all up to me.
And it sounds like you have an incredible amount of respect for your parents, despite what you've gone through.
Yes. I mean, the issues they had were with each other. And at some points, they kind of they didn't ever take it out on me, but I guess everyone who's listening who's who's a child of divorce will know that, when parents get divorced, there's always some of it ends up affecting the child, whether they intend it to or not. So I think just me kind of speaking up and saying, hey, this is affecting me in this way. I think if you did it this other way, it wouldn't so much.
Gosh, I can't believe that. I mean, it's so advanced, so mature to be able to say, how about this as a solution? I'll choose who I spend my time with. I mean, that's just sheer brilliance.
Yeah, it just felt like the most logical thing at the time, really. I just thought both my parents love me, but they don't love each other. But if they both love me, then they should respect what I want. Yeah, that's what I thought at the time. I don't even think it wasn't an ego thing or anything. I just thought, if they don't like each other and they can't communicate effectively with each other, why should they make decisions when they're very biased? If I love them both equally and they both love me equally, then I'm the least biased person in the situation, so I should make these decisions.
It's just absolute genius. I love it. Ah, tell me about you said you're very hard on yourself.
Yes,
What form does that take? Is it a positive thing or a negative thing or both?
I think it's both. I think it used to be more negative. So, for example, I didn't do badly in my A levels, but I didn't do as amazingly as I was expecting. Based on my previous academic records in this other country I grew up in, I was kind of expecting A stars, and then I didn't. I got a few Bs. Um, and at the time, I kind of thought, oh, I could have revised harder, I could have done this, I could have done that. But then I also thought, no, actually, I moved to a different country by myself when I was 16, and I had to not only learn things in a different language. Yes, I spoke English, but I'd never done it in an academic setting before, and I was a year ahead in school. There are a lot of factors. Um, but yes, it took me quite a few years to get over that. But then I think, then I took a year out. Then when I ended up at university and I was amongst people that had straight A stars and were brilliant, I thought, actually, from now on, my A levels don't even matter. So I thought, what I need to do is just, move forward. Now I've been in England enough time that I can, do better. And I'll know that it's not just me that didn't work hard. I'll know if I'm actually good at this or not. And then I got a first class mark in my degree. So I kind of felt like I'd redeemed myself a bit. And I think what also changed was kind of the longer I spent in England, the more friends I made. And I met my boyfriend, and kind of they helped tell me, if I'd ever kind of do not so great in something, they would be really supportive and say, yeah, but look at how hard you had it to get to the chance to do this thing in the first place. And look at all these other amazing things you did. And also, at the end of the day, this one tiny thing doesn't matter. It will have basically zero impact on your life overall. And what you need to do is just keep going. And that's what you've always done. So you should keep going, and we're here to support you.
Wow. Do you know, it's self-love. You have a very healthy amount of self-love, which I think is crucial.
Yeah, I think it took me a while to get here. Um, when I was 7, I remember in class, so I just moved school for I don't know what time, and it was this school in this tiny village where pretty much everyone was related. So I don't mean it in a weird way. I mean all the children in the class were kind of second cousins of each other. Um, so I was kind of the odd one out. I was the new girl. And at one point, I don't know, we had this sort of really basic ethics class for 7-year-olds. And the person conducting it kind of asked, okay, can I have a quick show of hands? Who here likes themselves? Everyone put their hands up except for me. And then when they said, who here doesn't like themselves? I was the only one who put my hand up. And the school actually did nothing about it. And then I think my parents kind of went in, this is another show of them being really supportive. They just spoke to my school teacher and said, first they said they thought I was bored in class and I should be moved forward a grade. And then they also said that, clearly I had some self-esteem issues. And then what the school said was, oh, well, she's a great student. We only offer counselling to bad students. She doesn't need it.
Wow. Did your parents go in to speak to the school because of the show of hands of who likes themselves and who doesn't? Was that related?
I think so, yes. I think I just got home and I told them because at that point, I probably did what most little children do. And they'll say, what did you do at school today? And I just said it. And I didn't, they didn't show me how concerned they were. But then they told me a few years later, they said, yeah, we were concerned about your self-esteem. And honestly, we didn't feel very well equipped on how to deal with it. So we tried to ask the school for professional help. They didn't give us any. So then we thought, right, we'll try and do something then.
So what happened? Was it resolved?
The school did nothing. I don't really remember, actually. It's kind of mostly just a blur. As I said, I think it took a few years to go from that to then when I was 12 and me deciding my own custody agreement. I think it was, yeah, I do think, I think it was probably the next time I moved school. That's when I kind of realized, I think I had a moment of realizing I move around a lot. I'm an only child. In some situations, I'm the only constant factor that I have. When I move into a new school and everyone's already friends, I'm the only person that will be me my entire life.
You are all you've got.
Exactly. So I thought, I might as well like me. And if I don't like me, then I'm going to change myself so I do like me.
It's so amazing. God. Why didn't you like yourself at the age of 7? Do you know now?
I think it was mostly because of what other people thought. And, I think other people didn't act as if they liked me because I was always a new girl. I think that's basically it,
Right.
Yeah, so which made me think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Whereas then
yeah, you took it personally.
And also, I think I was always considered the foreign girl as well, even though I grew up there because my parents were English speakers. It's just small things such as sometimes at school, my parents would give me carrots and celery for snacks, and the other school children would have like a chocolate, croissant or junk food, and they'd be like, "Oh, look at the weird foreign girl who's also new. Look at her eating her celery." And I would just, at first, I'd kind of feel really embarrassed, and I would then ask my parents, "Please don't pack me any more celery." But then I kind of got to a point where I said, I like celery and it's healthier and it gives me better kind of energy because, if you just eat chocolate, you're just bouncing along the walls and my celery energy is more sustained. So it's just small things like that.
Amazing.
And I just managed to turn them around and go from, well, I like them and, what should matter is if I like them because I'm the one doing them.
That's so amazing. So inspirational. I mean, this idea that essentially through the pain of not fitting in, you found yourself.
Yes.
It's just incredibly powerful. What does the future look like for you? What are your plans? Do you have any?
Well, I've just started a 4-year PhD, so I guess I'll finish that first. I chose to do my PhD because I really enjoyed my master's and I thought it came back to me wanting to do medicine from a young age as well. I just thought I really want to have the chance to do a single piece of work that I think could really potentially have an impact on other people and help their health. And I really wanted the chance because during my master's was great, but it was, it was only 5 months, 6 months. So I didn't really have the chance to take full ownership over a piece of research and complete it. So I really wanted that opportunity so I can really make something mine and put in, a lot of effort and really, make it into something great. But after that, I'm not really sure what I want to do. Maybe I want to continue with research. I know that I definitely want to do some sort of science communication thing. I've been doing that throughout my undergraduate, and now as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of outreach. I set up mentoring schemes in schools. I judge science competitions. I just like talking to young children that were like me. And I know sometimes they find it hard to relate to me because just small things such as my accent, I sound, lots of pupils will say, "Oh, well, you sound posh. How do we know you came from a low income background and similar to ours?" Or, when I say the institution I study at and the level of qualification I'm getting, sometimes people don't necessarily relate to me, but I'm going to keep trying. I just think it's really important. And even if they don't recognize me as kind of one of them, then, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. And I think I can help them in ways that they don't necessarily notice. And so I'm going to carry on doing it.
It's so tricky, isn't it? Because as individuals, we want to strive to be our best, but at the same time, sometimes it can kind of leave us on a golden pedestal, and that's a very lonely place.
Yes, yes, it is.
How do you resolve that balancing act?
Um, I think that is partly why I do so much volunteer work. I think there probably is. I like to think that I do it selflessly, but I think it has a selfish component of me, using it as a way to keep myself grounded, to always make sure, yes, I've achieved things and I'm very proud of them, but this is where I came from, and it's my responsibility, it's my generation's responsibility to make sure that the younger generation can achieve what we've achieved. And even if I had some rough patches, I've had lots of advantages that other people haven't. I did have supportive parents that gave me that independence. I was able to achieve good grades to get myself scholarships. Not everyone is capable of doing that. So I think, I have had privilege in some senses. So I do think I have a responsibility socially to go and try and encourage the next generation of scientists and engineers, because, we are the future. And at the moment, my generation is the future. But in a few years, it's the children that are now in primary school.
What about the different aspects of being a woman? Like what about fitting in motherhood and relationships and things like that? Like how do you negotiate your way through that?
It is difficult, as I said, especially because, I've only experienced being a woman, so I don't always recognize bias or sexism immediately because I don't know what it would be like if I was a man. So that is difficult. I mean, unfortunately, I think the way to do it is, I don't think it's up to us women. We don't need to change our attitudes. I think it's everyone else really that needs to be educated on that, they should not treat us differently. We aren't less worthy. We shouldn't have to work harder. So the way I do it is I just try and educate younger people, I think from a young age. So I started a mentoring scheme during my undergraduate, which was in a local primary school that was really underperforming, really underfunded, really, really sad. In fact, halfway through my sessions, we had to cancel because they had a break-in where I think 7 windows were broken, and some local youths stole all the school's computers, and then they had to shut the school for a while because there was broken glass everywhere and it wasn't safe, and they didn't have the money to hire people in to replace the windows. Yeah, it was a really sad story. Sorry, where was I going with this? Yes, so it was a mixed school, but the teachers had told me that the boys were kind of very dominating and kind of intimidated the girls quite a bit. And also the girls came from families where lots of their mothers were very young. They were in their early 20s, and lots of their families kind of raised them with the idea of, oh, well, if you're a girl, you're going to have children and stay at home. And if you're a man, then you'll go do a plumbing apprenticeship or something like that. So the school and I worked together to trial kind of separating a group of girls that were really underconfident and underperforming in science. We pulled them out 1 hour a week from the overall group. I know there were 11 of them. And once a week, I would go in and run a STEM workshop that I designed myself. I would provide the materials, I got funding for it. I would go in, I recruited volunteers, and we'd run the activity with them and just try and get the girls talking about, this is fun, isn't it? Yeah, science is fun. Why wouldn't you want to do this? You're really good at it. Just trying to get their confidence to increase. And then by the end of the couple months we did this, 2 of the girls then got the highest stats grades in maths in the entire year. So they went from being kind of the bottom 11 to the two best, which is a huge achievement. So I'm very glad we did that. And that, I helped change these girls' perceptions of themselves. But I wish we'd done something with the boys as well. I mean, it's just impossible to do everything at once, especially while you're doing a degree. But I think it's a really hard balance to find. How do you help young women, gain the self-confidence and the belief in themselves that they need and that they deserve? But also, how do you get young boys and men to truly respect women? And how can you do that all together? Do you have to separate them? Do you keep them together? It's just, I think there's a lot of questions and a lot of things to still work out.
Yeah, it's a very complex, multi-layered issue. And it will not be solved with a quick fix. I mean, we have to change stereotypes, we have to change cultures, traditions, and, it's a big task, but I think it's so necessary in order to get young women believing that they can be empowered within STEM.
Yes, definitely.
Gosh, I wish I could talk to you for hours more, because I think, you've just got so much wisdom to impart, and I've loved listening to you. I felt incredibly kind of enlightened in hearing your story and how you've turned things around through adversity. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun, and thank you for being such a great listener and being so supportive.
Oh, gosh, you're welcome. You've been a real asset to this series, so thank you.
Thank you.
That's it from my STEM guest this week. Gosh, so much was discussed that I feel like I need a few hours to go away and reflect on everything that was said. I truly feel touched by my guest's experiences and honestly deeply inspired by hearing how she climbed out of very dark situations to come out winning. Thank you so much for listening this week. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you next week on Silence.